Your kind of music, all day, all night, right here on your only station, Pawa Radio.
Good evening. This is a wonderful and a beautiful Monday. It's fantastic to be here and to be doing this with you. Karibuni sana. Those who are joining us, and of course, if you know there's someone who needs to be listening to this conversation, make sure you reach out to them. This is Sheria Dive right here on Power Radio with me, WaNjeri, where we take a deep dive into matters legal. Now, there's a bill that is being brought to Parliament, and of course, we know Monday we like to focus on what's happening in Parliament and things like that. So we're going to be looking at the Livestock Bill 2024 that has been proposed by Kikuyu legislator Kimani Ichung'wah, who is also the majority leader in Parliament. And there have been a lot of stories about this bill. So the idea here is to just try and look at it and see what exactly does it provide for, who does it affect, and what should we, as we look to be invited for public participation, because there will be a public participation session, what exactly should Kenyans be speaking about? Are there any challenges? Are there any things that perhaps should be red flags and that as a nation we can look at? Of course, even as I do this, I'd like to hear from those people, especially if you grew up in a family where you kept livestock. And as you talk about livestock, remember, under this act, livestock actually refers not only to cows and goats. If you go to the definition section, livestock includes cattle, camel, sheep, goat, pig, poultry, lagomorphs. I don't know what's a lagomorph, okay? Companion animals, draft animals, bees, any emerging livestock or any wild animal, bird or reptile in a state of captivity and includes the young ones. So this, I think, is also going to deal with those people who have wild animals either on their property or even like the orphanages that we have here. So it's a very interesting law that is being developed. So that's what we're going to be looking at, the Livestock Act. And did you know that under this act, you're actually restrained as an individual from dealing in livestock feeds? So I'd like to hear from the farmers and those who grew up on farms. How do you think this is going to affect you? And what is your feedback to some of the issues that we'll be addressing today? So let's get some music, and then when we come back, we begin to look at this on a step-by-step basis, because there's also a very big concern about the number of agencies that are being created using this act. Kenya has been talking about austerity measures. Does this act help us in getting those austerity measures done, or is it an opportunity to bloat further the wage bill? But let's go. Let's get some music.
Your kind of music, all day, all night, right here on your only station, Power Radio.
Yes, welcome back. Now we're talking about the Livestock Bill that of 2024, and basically this is an act of Parliament to provide for the development of the livestock sector and the regulation of livestock inputs and livestock products. It will also be touching on research and capacity building in the livestock sector, and the establishment of livestock agencies and training agencies, and for connected purposes. Now, in terms of describing what an animal is, they mean an animal is any domestic or wild animal and includes a bird, bee, fish, or other aquatic animal. So this bill will actually affect those who are in bird keeping, who are in beekeeping, who are keeping fish or any other aquatic animals. Of course, we know that there are people who are licensed, for instance, to farm crocodiles, right? So even they are affected by this bill. Now, one of the big things that has been an issue has been the question of the feed stuff, okay? And the bill proposes to define animal feed stuff as any substance obtained by a process of crushing, grinding or grinding, or by the addition to any substance or the removal of any ingredient. And basically here we're talking about the things that you would feed these birds, these bees, this fish, or other aquatic animal, okay? And even this domestic animal. The bird feed, this is one of the main issues that the bill wants to deal with. Now, the question of feed in Kenya is not very well regulated. So you have people who can, it's become a market that's very easy for people to get into, right? So one of the things the bill wants to do is to ensure that we regulate how feeds are made. I have seen online, people have said that this means that, even the farmer in the village, they cannot actually go ahead and make their own feed. However, if you look at the definition of that animal feed stuff, this is what it says. It does not include straw, chaff, underground hay, silage, cereal in the grain, or any substance which has been crushed, grist, or ground for a farmer in accordance with his directions for his own use, unless the Cabinet Secretary declares by notice in the Gazette such substance to be animal foodstuff under Section 97. So what is being said here is that farmers can still manufacture their own feed. They can still go ahead and crush the grain or watuadhara. You can still have your napier and you process it as long as it's for your own use. What this act wants to do is to regulate feed that you sell to other people, so commercial feeds. But at the same time, remember that the act is saying that that definition might be expanded under Section 97. So this is always the problem sometimes with how laws are made in Kenya. When the law is passed, it is passed as a law that is very clear. But I feel that this definition, immediately you say that the Cabinet Secretary can change the definition of what feedstuff is, and even there's always a possibility that they can include this, foodstuff or feed that the farmer is developing for themselves in their own farm, in their own private space. So this is one of the ways I think farmers are likely to be affected when the government, through the minister or the Cabinet Secretary, then goes ahead and declares that, hey, also this is animal foodstuff and it needs to be included. The other thing as well is I have seen questions about, Palo Shago, you call a bull. There's a guy who has a bull that is used to impregnate the cows, okay? That also seeks to be regulated. And one of the things the government wants to do is to try and ensure that animal genetics, that area is highly regulated. And we're going to be looking at that and just seeing how that is meant to happen. However, one of the key concerns with this act is that it actually establishes several government agencies. There are several government agencies that are being established. And we're going to be looking at this one by one. Now, you know that the president has been saying we don't have money for things. We cannot hire more people. But this bill actually will introduce over 5 new agencies, okay? So let's begin with the first one. The first agency that will be established is what we are calling the Livestock Inputs and Products Regulatory Authority. I think that is LIPRA. Government, they like those they like those 2 names. So what is LIPRA? If you go to Section 7 of that bill, Section 7 of that bill where LIPRA is being actually being set up. Section 8. It says there's established an authority to be known as the Livestock Inputs and Products Regulatory Authority. Okay? Now, what is the composition of the board of this authority? It will have a board that will have a chairperson appointed by the president, the principal secretary relating to livestock, the director of veterinary services, the director of livestock production, 1 county executive committee member nominated by the council of governors, 3 professionals with knowledge and experience in animal sciences, not being public officers, nominated by professional bodies in the livestock sector, 1 person being a livestock producer, nominated by a livestock farmers organization, and the chief executive officer of the authority. Okay? So there already, it has created almost 10 positions in the board. And of course, you're going to have a chief executive officer of the organization, and they are going to be supported by a secretariat, right? So what are the functions of this authority? Number 1, they'll regulate the production, manufacture, importation, exportation, distribution and sale of animal feedstuff. And this is with respect to fodder, concentrate, supplements, feed additives, and premixes to ensure compliance with national standards, okay? Then they will also approve stud identification. A stud is the ndume, okay? So how do you identify a stud? They'll also set up a register of breeding animals and undertake performance, recording, and genetic evaluation. The board will also oversee sustainable use and conservation of animal genetic resources. They will monitor the utilization of imported and local animal genetic resources intended for breed improvement, okay? And of course, when talking about genetic resources, basically we're talking about semen, animal semen, all that. Now, they will also regulate imported and locally manufactured equipment that is used in the livestock sector. Okay, so this is one to watch out for, because manufacturing equipment now comes under this new authority. They will also regulate the production, processing, sale, and importation of hive products. So this is where people are saying if you are selling hives, you have to be registered. Okay, this is where that was coming from. Then they will also set standards for livestock infrastructure, including the design and construction of livestock structures. Sawa. What should be the space where the cow is, or the camel is, or the goat is? So they'll give standards, and they'll actually regulate that. Now, there's been the argument that the idea behind this bill is to actually deal with people who are producing livestock at a commercial scale and not necessarily dealing with the small farmer in the mashinani, okay? And you're going to be looking at that to see whether that's actually clearly mentioned or it's just a statement that is being thrown out there. Now, they will also maintain a national database for livestock value chain actors. So we'll have breeders, breeder associations, animal feeds dealers, beekeepers, and other livestock input and livestock product service providers. This authority will also be identifying training needs in the counties. They will set standards for rearing and appropriate utilization and management of draft and other domestic animals. They will set the standards for the delivery of extension services. They will also be involved in inspections through other government agencies. They will register and license dealers in livestock inputs and livestock products. Sawa. So it means people who are now getting into commercial livestock production. Ule Masai akipeleka hizo ngombe 100 Kiamaiko or Dagoretti, that is a commercial use of livestock, isn't it? So those are the people that are now coming under this regulation, that when that is happening, they have to be registered and licensed since they're dealing in livestock products. Then they also will regulate livestock sector industries and value chains, including poultry, apiculture, and pig. And apiculture, of course, talking about bees. And then they'll perform any other function as may be conferred by any other written law. So here we have a new agency that is being created, a new authority that is being created. And of course, under this, the government will also be appointing livestock inputs and product inspectors. More people are being employed. I don't know where the money is going to come from for this, because every day we are being told there's no money, but there you go. One of the criticisms of this bill has been, does the government actually have the capacity to go ahead and carry out their roles and regulate this industry the way this act is trying to create it? I think that's going to be one of the big challenges that they actually run into. But of course, the powers of a compliance officer and inspectors, this is one of the things that we need to really look at, is that they can stop, search, or detain any aircraft, ship, or vehicle in which they believe that any article subject to the provisions of this act are being conveyed. Sawa, akiona lori inapita hapo na iko na ng'ombe ndani, they can stop it. They can stop it, search it, and detain. This is very problematic language, okay? Because they are not police officers, okay? So why is this power then being given to them? I think Section 15B should be one of those things that we look at. What power is this that we are giving compliance officers and inspectors? Then they can open and examine any receptacle or package which they believe contains any article to which the Act applies. They can examine any books, documents, or other records found in any place mentioned where they believe it contains any information relevant to the enforcement of this Act. Part of the challenge I'm seeing here with this is that one of the key issues you're going to see is matters of data protection, because it appears that the inspectors are being given a lot of power and a lot of authority. They can actually come to your premises and just take your books and seize those books and look at them. Then I think also when you look at subclause E, it says that they will also have the power to direct that any part of the premises which they have power to enter shall be left undisturbed for so long as it is reasonably necessary for the purpose of any test or inspection. So this, I think, needs more engagement because we are going to look at a situation where we can have problems, and serious problems when it comes to how people deal with these inspectors. Now, one of the things they've tried to do is to say where the premises that the inspector can enter is a dwelling house, the compliance officer or inspector may not enter without the consent of the occupant except under the authority of a warrant issued by a magistrate or a judge. Okay? Now, the question to ask here is, if you have cows and goats in a shed outside of your house, can that be considered to be a dwelling house? Is that a dwelling house? It's not a dwelling house, because a dwelling house would be the place where you actually are living. So this will only apply to those people who are living with animals in the house. I don't know how many such people we still have as of this moment. Now, the owner or a person in charge of any place which is to be inspected, or a person found at that place, is expected to accord the compliance officer or inspector all reasonable assistance. Okay? You have to comply with what they're saying. You have to give them the assistance that they need. Now, the compliance officer or inspector may also order a person to provide any document, information, or sample specified by him. Okay? Now, what happens when you refuse to assist him? Okay? When you refuse to assist him, number one, if you hinder or obstruct the compliance officer or the inspector from doing their work, if you fail to comply with a lawful order made by an inspector, if you refuse entry to a compliance officer or an inspector upon the land, if you impersonate a compliance officer or an inspector, if you refuse access to a compliance officer or an inspector to inspect your documents or records, if you mislead or give wrongful information to the compliance officer or inspector, if you remove, alter, or interfere in any way with anything that the inspector will have seized, then you commit an offense and you're liable to a fine not exceeding 50,000 shillings or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 months or both. Sawa sawa? Then, the authority can also designate laboratories. And these laboratories will be where samples are submitted for analysis. So this then creates the question, okay? Can the authority designate private laboratories for this work? That's a question that's not being answered here, because according to the language of the bill, it's not clear whether it's the government that's going to build these laboratories, because it says designation, okay? And they designate this by the way of a gazette notice. So I don't know, they're going to be seeing some tenderpreneurship also coming in where private interests are also being given this status. That is the first agency that is being created under this new law. And as I've said, it's going to have a lot of employees. That's the Livestock Inputs and Products Regulatory Authority, okay? Na ndio kwanza, because the next authority that is being created is the Kenya Livestock Research Organizations. And one of the questions has been, I thought we already have the KALRO, Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization. So how does that fit in? We're going to be looking at that. But for now, let's get some music. And then when we come back, we'll look at the Kenya Livestock Research Organization that is being introduced under this livestock bill. Let's go.
Your kind of music, all day, all night, right here on your only station, Pawa Radio.
Welcome back. We're talking about the livestock bill by Kimani Ichung'wah that has really caused a lot of negative feedback online. And we're just trying to understand what exactly is this bill talking about and what is it providing for. Now, we've already discussed that the bill will actually be introducing a livestock inputs and products regulatory authority. And this function of authority will be to regulate the production, importation, exportation, distribution, manufacture of animal feedstuff, okay? Genetic resources, inputs, products, and capacity building in the livestock sector. And this will be an agency on its own. And we anticipate that it's going to have a lot of employees. I don't know where the money for that is going to come from, but the bill also seeks to establish what we call the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organizations. Now, this, at the moment, we have the KALRO, Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organizations, okay? So what the bill now wants to do is that it wants to create the Kenya Livestock Research Organizations, KLRO. And the idea here is to consolidate all the livestock research institutions that are currently within KALRO, okay? Now, the function of this organization will be to include conducting and coordinating livestock research in line with relevant policies and to develop improved livestock production technologies. Okay, so here we are dealing mostly with questions of research. And now, those organizations within KALRO at the moment, under the proposed Section 24, the research institutes, okay, will now be operating as semi-autonomous in the operations, okay? They'll be semi-autonomous, not completely autonomous, but semi-autonomous, and they'll be able to implement their programs and their allocation and management of their resources. Now, their budgets shall be as approved by the board. So we're not doing away with those research entities within KALRO. They're actually being made semi-autonomous, but they'll come under the Kenya Livestock Research Organization. Additionally, under Clause 27, the management of a research institute shall be under a research institute advisory committee, and for each institute, and a director will actually be appointed. So we have now questions of research are being dealt with through that. I think I remember during the election time, the president was very keen on ensuring that agriculture is one of the key things for his legacy. So I think this is how the government is trying to move to just consolidate that side of livestock. The other thing as well is that the bill also proposes the establishment of the Livestock and Livestock Products Marketing Board, okay? Now, under the proposed Clause 34, the functions of the Marketing Board will include advising the national and county governments on matters relating to production and marketing of livestock and livestock products, promoting trade in livestock and livestock products, mobilizing and coordinating resources for investment in and promotion of marketing of livestock and livestock products. They will also be in charge of identifying market needs and trends in the livestock sector and advising livestock stakeholders. They'll be charged with providing market intelligence on the supply of and demand for livestock and livestock products. They will support the development and rehabilitation of livestock markets infrastructure. They will collect, collate, and disseminate data on livestock, establishing strategies, strategic business partnerships, while providing mechanisms for price stabilization of livestock and livestock products. And when you hear price stabilization, that means you are trying to fix the price. So that's one of the things that we need to also put a question mark on. What exactly are they talking about with price stabilization, and what is the danger here? Remember, Kenya operates a free market where you can sell your goods for whatever price, and it's for the people buying to decide whether they're going to buy them or not. So are we actually seeing an introduction of an attempt to try and manage the price of livestock and livestock products on the market? Now, part of the challenge I have with this bill is that for some reason we seem to really like big big government. You know, we want to create more and more institutions. We want to create more and more bodies. And so you find we now have a marketing board that is here. And I think the reality as well is also to look at other marketing boards. How have they done? I think we have the tourism marketing board. How have they performed? So that when we say we are now introducing a livestock marketing board, are we learning from the mistakes that have been made in the past? Are we learning from some of the challenges that have been experienced, or are we just moving in that direction? So big government is one of the big issues that we need to resolve. But as I said, this bill actually wants to create almost 7 new entities. And all those 7 new entities, even if you give them 50 employees per entity, you're talking about 350 people coming into the national budget, which is already stretched as we speak, all right? Now, the bill also wants to provide for the establishment of the Kenya Veterinary Vaccines Institute, okay? Now, the functions of the institute will include, this is another institute, by the way, guys, okay? Just in case you didn't know, we are now dealing with a new institute, which is a Veterinary Vaccines Institute. Now, let's go to Clause 42. Under Clause 41, the function of the institute shall be to produce vaccines, veterinary vaccines. Okay, so Kenya seems to be keen to ensure that it has a vaccine production capacity. That, I think, has been one of the challenges where we do not have our own vaccines. We have to actually import. But they will also be charged with manufacturing, marketing, and distributing veterinary vaccines locally, regionally, and internationally. They will also be undertaking research on new innovations in veterinary vaccines production. So these are vaccines for livestock, okay, for animals. Then they will also develop and produce chemicals, media, reagents, and biological products for use in the production of vaccines. They'll maintain a strategic vaccines reserve for the country. They will also serve as a custodian of master seeds for veterinary vaccines production in the country. They'll advise the Cabinet Secretary on all matters relating to veterinary vaccines, and they'll perform any other such functions as may be conferred by the law. Of course, a board is being established with this as well, and they'll appoint a CEO and senior management staff. So this is an institute, okay? It's an institute that is being created. So you can imagine how many people you're going to have to employ in all that. But part of what they'll be able to do is that they should be able to receive gifts, grants, donations, or endowments made to the institute. This is the board that receives on behalf of the institute. Now, when you compare this with the other bodies that are being created, for instance, our CEO is appointed under Clause 40 of that Act, and they need to hold a bachelor's degree in veterinary medicine from a recognized university. So we have all those requirements that are being brought in to create the Veterinary Vaccines Institute. Now, because it's an institute, I think when you've had part of the responsibilities they have, nothing has been spoken about education, right? But when you look at the board of the institute, they've made provision for a livestock farmer to be part of the board, nominated by a livestock farmers organization, a person nominated by a livestock breeders association, a person nominated by a livestock vaccine distribution value chain organization. So all those provisions are being made to try and make sure that as many people in the industry make up part of that board. Now, remember sleeping sickness? Yes, tsetse fly. We are now creating the Kenya Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis Eradication Council. I'm going to try that again. Kenya Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis Eradication Council. So the idea here is that tsetse fly is still a risk factor in Kenya. And so we actually need a whole council to help us deal with the question of tsetse flies and trypanosomiasis, which is a sleeping sickness for animals. Unapata ng'ombe imelala na inakataa kuamka, imeumwa na tsetse fly, okay? So a council is established. Of course, there's a CEO for this council that has been set there. Now, I don't know if at the moment in Kenya, we actually have an agency or a government body that deals with the questions of tsetse flies. I've just done a quick search, and we actually have a Kenya Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis Eradication Council. Okay, this actually already exists, but if you look at this proposal in the bill, they now want to set up what we call the Eradication Council, okay? Which is the same thing as what already exists. So I wonder, are we creating an organization that already exists? Because I see that we have the Kenya Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis Eradication Council that already exists in the Republic of Kenya. So these are the things we'll need to ask when you're doing public participation. Why is it that an organization that already exists is also being created? I'm now, actually, niko hapa kwa website yao ya wanajiita KNTTEC, okay? And in their, if you look at the about page, it says Kenya Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis Eradication Council is a state corporation mandated to coordinate all Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis eradication activities in Kenya. We actually appear to be recreating something that already exists. I don't know why that is happening. So we need to understand why the government is taking this route. Because according to the website here, the council was gazetted in July 2012 as a successor to the Pan-African Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis Eradication Campaign, and it was formed to safeguard the gains made by PATEC and to coordinate Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis eradication activities. So this state corporation was created through a gazette notice, and I think now the idea is to introduce now a law where they can be anchored, okay? But what does that mean for them? Does it mean that the guys who are there, they leave and we get a new team or what? So those will be some of the questions that need to be answered. Then now, we are also creating another thing, which we are now calling the Kenya Animal Genetic Resources Center. And if you look at section 53, or rather clause 53 of this proposed act, let's actually start with 49, which establishes that institution. Now, the purpose of this institution will be to collaborate with county and national and county governments to undertake conservation of animal genetic resources, establish and manage an animal genetic resources gene bank, produce and distribute germplasm, and I'm going to be telling you what germplasm is. Hivi karibuni. Okay? Wakulima bwana. And germplasm is defined as seeds, plants, or plant parts. Seeds, plants, or plant parts useful in crop breeding, research, and conservation efforts. Okay, so where you have crop breeding, that's where they come in. So they'll be able to distribute that. Then there'll also be a reference lab for genotyping and testing of semen, embryos, and related animal germplasm. Okay. They will also, in collaboration with other institutions, research on, develop, adopt, and promote reproductive technologies for animal production. So these ones are dealing with those questions of animal production, the genetics. That's basically the idea of what this institution is being created to do. Now, beyond this, of course, just like the others, they will have a board and they will have a CEO, and we are creating a lot of employment. Tunatenga hapo, tumetenga sana. Fantastic. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Kenya Leather Development Authority. So far, I think we are counting 4. So we are not going to the 5th one. This is the 5th institution that is being created under this act. Of course, as I've said, The Tsetse and Trypanosomiasis Council already exists. It will exist as a result of Gazette notice. So I think the idea now is to try and anchor them on the law. So sawa, farmers, there's a lot coming. But of course, we are also going to be looking at some of those provisions that are putting a lot of water in people's stomachs so that we understand how do we deal with that. Let's go.
Your kind of music, all day, all night, right here on your only station, Pawa Radio.
Yes, we're talking livestock. Maneno ya ng'ombe na mbuzi na kondoo na ngamia na nguruwe. Hata nyuki ni livestock, wacha niwaambie. Hata hiyo iko hapo, hata samaki. We are including everything. Now, this bill also wants to establish the Kenya Leather Development Authority. As you know already, we have a Kenya Leather Development Council. So this bill will actually seek to introduce this authority, and the authority will just replace the council as we know it now. Now, of course, if you remember what the president was saying during his campaign time, is that Kenya loses a lot of money in terms of leather. And this is one of the areas that he said he's really keen to try and develop so that Kenya, with all the ngombes we have and all the goats, I think that's where leather would come from. How do we as a country earn maximum returns from that? So part of the responsibilities of the authority will be to establish and promote development of leather industrial parks. They'll also be advising the cabinet secretary on matters relating to the utilization of leather and promotion of leather goods. They'll be promoting adoption of new technologies in the leather industry, regulating value chain actors, collecting and analyzing data on leather and leather goods. Part of the work will also be to promote and coordinate the marketing of leather and leather products. Okay? They'll conduct capacity building on the production of leather products and providing inputs to manufacturers of leather products. Then Part 9 of the bill provides for that all the livestock agencies that have been established now in the bill, it talks about how do you disqualify someone from appointment to the board? How do the boards conduct their business? What is the function of the CEO? What about the remuneration of board members, the committees of the board? How does someone end up vacating an office, okay? But one of the key things we need to look at is the question of how are we actually going to fund these organizations, okay? That's one of the key questions that I'm sure everyone is asking. How are we actually going to fund these organizations? Now, the funds of a livestock agency shall consist of monies allocated and appropriated by the National Assembly for purposes of the livestock agencies. So this means that they'll be in the budget. Your taxes are going to make this possible. But secondly, they can also receive grants, loans, gifts, donations, or other endowments given from any source approved by the National Treasury. So there has to be an approval for those funds. And then there will also be funds that may vest in or accrue to the livestock agency in the performance of their function. So in case they are charging you fees, this is the fee for getting this license, all that. That is where that is done. Okay, and of course, the organizations are expected to provide estimates of what they need for payment of salaries, payment of pension, maintenance of buildings, maintenance of equipment and other property, all that. So I think we're going to see a boom in those guys who are ensuring that the organization is able to buy things. We're going to see a boom there because they need to provide estimates of what they need before the end of the financial year. So, sawa. Now, the bill also seeks to establish the following institution. It says that the following livestock training institutions shall be deemed to have been established under this act as unincorporated bodies. You have the Animal Health and Industry Training Institute, Kabete, Animal Health and Industry Training Institute, Nyahururu, Animal Health and Training Institutes and Industry, Animal Health and Industry Training Institute in Domba, Meat Training Institute, Athi River, Dairy Training Institute, Naivasha, Livestock Training Institute, Wajir, and National Beekeeping Institute, Lenana. Now, these institutes shall be established under subsection 1 and shall be centers of excellence. Now, the clause also says that the cabinet secretary may, by order of a gazette, establish a livestock training institution. Okay? And once that institution is established, of course, it becomes a body corporate, which means it can be sued in its own name. Sasa. Then, of course, you're not going to create institutions if you don't create an examination board. We are now creating a livestock training institutions examinations board. I don't know why this is not being done under NEC, which already exists and is the Kenya National Examinations Council. But we've now decided that we need to create an examinations board for livestock training institutions. Okay? Let's create another body to help with this. Of course, as I also say this, I know, for instance, lawyers will have their examinations administered through the Council of Legal Education. So maybe the government is looking at this as an institution that is separate, okay? And is looking at livestock training as a separate area of trainings. And therefore, we have the institution that is being created, which is the examinations board. They're going to be issuing examinations and all that, okay? Now, animal breeding, this is a big issue. A person shall not engage in commercial livestock breeding unless they are registered under the Act and they hold a valid license to operate as such, okay? Now, what exactly is commercial livestock breeding? That guy, uko mashinani, who brings his cow, his bull to come and mount your cow, you pay a certain amount of money, right? Is that commercial? To the extent that they are being paid money, then that's commercial. They need to be registered and they need to hold a valid license. And they shall file returns on the animal identity, pedigree, and performance, okay? Now, they shall not use the premises, facility, machinery, plant, article, or thing specified in the registration certificate and license to conduct any business other than livestock breeding. You understand what that means? It means that if you say nikona nini, let's I hear they call those bulls different names. So let's say we are calling it Simba. You have your bull Simba, which is impregnating all the cows in the village. You have to have a designated area for it, okay? But that designated area, you cannot use it to conduct any other business other than livestock breeding. So you have to have a specific area where that breeding can take place. And of course, the authority can cancel a certificate of registration or a license that has been issued to you. So wale wako pale mashinani, unaitanga so and so alete ng'ombe yake, kuja ipandilia yako, mwambie atahitaji license under these provisions of the Livestock Act. Now, that livestock breeder, you have to identify and register your breeding animals in accordance with the proposed clause 85, and you apply to the authority as the regulations will have provided, okay? And remember, your license can always be revoked at any time, okay? Now, one of the interesting things is that a livestock breeder has the right to own any intellectual property that may arise from his breeding activities without fear of its appropriation. So this is a good thing because it means that the intellectual property that comes from those breeding activities remains with you. The reality, guys, is this. We've been doing things kienyeji way here, the African way. But if you look at countries in Europe and maybe even in the United States, what you have is that you have research centers that will even take the semen of that cow and work on it in their labs so that they can produce maybe a breed that is resistant to certain diseases, a breed that the meat, it can develop meat faster, okay? So now the idea is the intellectual property that comes from that needs to be protected, all right? Now, we might look at a situation in the US where, for instance, if a company sells you seeds, you cannot take those seeds and replant them. You have to go buy new seeds. Otherwise, you have violated their intellectual property. So what happens if a breeder comes and they inseminate, and once they inseminate, an animal is born from that? How do we classify that animal? And can that animal then be, let's say if it was a bull, can it go and breed other cows without the authority of this breeder. So those are some of the things we're going to be dealing with. And for lawyers who are listening to this, I think you need to start looking at livestock as an area of practice, because we are going to need a lot of lawyers who can speak into livestock issues, and especially into matters to do with intellectual property. Sawa. Now, breeding animals, of course, they will be identified with a code. In the case of an animal intended for local commercial purposes, they can have an ear tag, they can have a tattoo, ear notching, freeze branding, sketching, or an electronic device may be used. For an animal intended for export, you can only tattoo it or photograph it. Sawa? Now, what happens if you deface or obliterate or remove an animal's identification? You commit an offense, okay? Or if you brand your animal with any branding other than those made and registered in accordance with the Act, you commit an offense. So the government also wants to ensure that the branding of animals is done strictly, okay? If you're found guilty, you'll be given a fine not exceeding 100,000 shillings or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months. Now, for those who want to create their own private research institutions, the importation and export of animal genetic material, you have to get the necessary permits. So if you've just been exporting genetic material outside the country, you'll now be required to get a license moving forward, okay? Then, in case you want to be an entrepreneur who wants to enter into the reproductive and genetics technology service, you shall apply for registration, and it has to be where the services offered do not fall under the scope of veterinary practice, because veterinary practice is regulated under a different law. Sawa. Let's take a short break, and then when we come back, I hope we can finish on this. And then also talk a bit about the feed stuff and bees. Is it true that you now cannot just set up a beehive and that you need a license to set up a beehive? We're going to be looking at that. But let's get some music.
Your kind of music, all day, all night, right here on your only station, Power Radio.
Yes, welcome back. We're talking about the livestock bill. And of course, remember, as I'd said earlier, there had been a fear that farmers cannot now create their own feed. And I think we've been able to debunk that and said that what the proposal is actually providing for is that if you want to sell feed stuff, then you have to apply for a license. If you don't have a license, the fine is 500,000 shillings, okay? Or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months. And when it comes to your feeds, the government has to tell you what you can put in those feeds and what you cannot put in those feeds. We also talk about questions of labeling. How do you label animal feeds? And the government is really trying to come in and regulate this sector, properly. So there are a lot of rules that we'll be seeing coming in with regards to what can go into a feed, how do you brand the feeds, and all those matters. One of the key things that had people getting worried is beekeeping. Now, under Clause 97, the Cabinet Secretary, in consultation with the Council of Governors, may make regulations for the registration of beekeepers, the standards of beehives, the branding of beehives, and the disposal of bees, honeycombs, and beehives. Okay? Now, this matter is that's all they've said, and they've left it at that. So it means that moving forward, we are actually going to see a requirement on beekeepers to be registered, how beehives are made and what the standards need to be for beehives are created, and also how beehives need to be branded moving forward. I don't know how this is going to affect those people we have in the mashinani, people who just have a beehive wameweka hapo kwa mti, they just get their honey for their own personal use. So I don't know how that's going to affect those individuals, but we can only wait and see. I know that this bill is still in the early stages. So what is going to happen is we're going to see a lot of changes being made to this, or perhaps even there will be an opportunity for you to have to be able to have public participation and to give your views on some of these things that are being proposed. Of course, in the regulations that are being provided, for instance, animal control and welfare also goes to the licensing of dogs. You know that licensing of dogs already happens. And so that's fine. Now, the regulations also provide for how the boards are to be conducted. They also provide for, which acts of parliament are going to be affected by these proposals. So we'd like to hear your views on this. We're going to make sure that this episode, let's call it an episode, it's going to be available on YouTube, and you're going to share it. And if you have any questions, just address them to @PowerRadio, @JamesKWaNjeri, and you're going to give our responses and feedback on that. Or you can even use a chat section just to ask any of the questions that you have. Sawa. That's it for us. Flozy and I here from the studio. Thank you so much for making time to listen to us on Sheria Dive. Have a lovely evening. Don't be like me. Don't get that bad flu that's going round. Make sure you stay warm. Drink some warm water and dawa. And see you on Saturday. Saturday, we are back with this show between 1 to 3 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you. Have a blessed evening and a lovely rest of the week. Let's go.
Your kind of music, all day, all night, right here on your only station, Power Radio.